To lead this, the attorney at law from MME Legal, a big friend of the ICBC family. Always good to see him here. Please welcome Daniel Heyman. Daniel Heyman. And the rest of it, you guys come out too. Everybody come out together. There you go. You got it?
Got it?
Fantastic.
Thank you. Okay, thanks everybody. Well, the ones of you who made it here, I really have to say congratulations. It's Wednesday afternoon. I hope you're not too hungover from the last 2 days of conference. We've been speaking about and talking about regulatory harmonization in the cannabis sector, I would say, for the better part of the last decade, right? And yet, in 2026, a producer with a fully GMP certified site in Canada or Portugal still finds that German auditors still have to do a second check, right? A magisterial preparation that the Berlin pharmacist can dispense has a problem to do that in Madrid, for example, or in other European jurisdictions. And a patient in Zurich, Berlin, or Toronto still has no guarantee that the same product in the same dosage, the same quality will be available to them in 6 months or so. So the fragmentation runs really through every layer of the industry. And the question is not whether we want harmonization. We all do in this room. We all want world peace. The question is, are we willing to give up something and to pay the price that is necessary? The regulators, for example, some sovereignty, maybe some tax income. The consultants as lawyers and so on, including myself, we're making a comfortable living from that complexity of fragmentation, I would say. We've just discussed that Claude is doing a really good job of eliminating that work to some extent. And also producers want to make sure that the barriers of entry, to some extent, remain high for new incumbents. So that's what we're going to talk about during the next 30 to 40 minutes. I'm going to leave some time for questions. My name's Daniel Heyman. I'm an attorney in Switzerland, specialized in cross-border transactions, as well as regulatory work. And I'm going to let my illustrious panel introduce themselves. So maybe Atia, you take the lead here.
Hi, my name is Atia Feroz. I'm the CEO and founder of AgCan Consultancy. We are some of the compliance consultants profiting off of your misery. And I'm also the founder of the International Cannabis Quality Standards Association, and we are working towards harmonization in the cannabis industry and bringing forward policies that will better the industry overall across the entire global landscape.
Thanks, Atia. My name is Rob Perry. I manage the sales and client-facing team at Grower IQ, which, if you haven't come across it before, is Cannabis ERP. So it's really tied into what we're talking about today. It's tracking data, compliance, regulatory, assisting companies with regulatory compliance. And harmonization is very close to our heart because we're active in 20 plus countries. I think we're 25 countries around the world right now, and they're all very different regulatory systems. So yeah, it would be lovely to see them all align.
Thank you. I'm Nikos Koukovinos. I work as a quality assurance lead in IA Agro. We are a consulting company from Greece, and we work with clients all over the world ensuring that they meet the stringent compliance for EU GACP and GMP in order for them to bring product to the European market. So I think harmonization and all these legal pathway that these companies have to go through is something that we come across every day. And it's something that we, as a group, not only as consultants and technical operators, but also legal people, are called to tie in here and solve this problem. So happy to be in today's panel.
Thanks. Patricia here, and I'm in New York at a Hodgson Russ, a law firm. General service law firm. I focus on the cannabis industry. We help operators and the various different growers, producers, dispensaries in New York and various other states. And also recently, a lot of the operators looking at the international markets, and also companies across the border looking to invest and looking at some of the US markets. And as far as harmonization, from the US perspective, you have 50 different states that don't all have a recreational market. Some have CBD hemp markets, some have medical markets only. And so, and those that do have recreational adult use markets, each of those is different. So talking about harmonization, we don't have it within the country itself yet, let alone looking at across other jurisdictions. So before that happens, I think for the U.S., that's going to be a little while. But who knows with the rescheduling? Obviously, that's a lot of folks are hopeful there.
I would like to pick up on that. Really, the question is if current cannabis regulations are fundamentally, Nikos, it's questions for you, are fundamentally different, or whether it's more a question of interpretation of those existing frameworks?
No, I think that claiming that those frameworks are fundamentally different is unfair, because all of them are somehow based on risk-based approach on quality management systems. They have strict controls over critical process parameters, process validation, and at the end point, they have above all the patient safety. So claiming that each system is fundamentally different is unfair. Where the problem...
May I just jump in?
Yeah, sure.
I want to challenge you because I disagree, okay? I think some, yes, are, some aren't. There's, for example, markets where you can bring products to market with advertisement on the product to some extent, where you can have branding on the product and so on. So there are some differences in regulation, I would say. Also in the US, you have a different type of medical market than you have in Canada, or especially here in Europe, where everything goes through magisterial preparations. I think we need to try and understand a little bit which framework are we talking about. We're talking about top line, let's say, legal regulations. What is the ultimate framework of the medical supply chain? We're now talking about medical. And what's the difference on some standards that are like GMP standards that also aren't fully harmonized and are incorporated into law in various jurisdictions? Can you draw a distinction there? Can you?
I think the problem there lies better in interpreting these rules, these guidelines mostly, because different regulations tend to have different implementation of GMP guidelines, for example. And I would like to, since I'm from Greece, I would like to bring up the example of Greece, where the law mandates Greek facilities to cultivate their own starting material there. Of course, downstream produce it and as an API or as a finished product. And then, again, the law mandates facilities to have an extraction line as well inside, in-house. So that's, compared to other countries, provides a disadvantage, I would call it, in initial operations, initial OPEX and CAPEX. But also provides an advantage on having a top quality product. So when you, for example, see an EU GMP certified facility in Greece, you'll see that it meets the strictest rules, whereas in a similar EU GMP certified facility somewhere else in the world may be similarly certified, but the quality levels of the product in there could be slightly different.
You know, I'd like to jump in there because you know, like from the U.S. perspective, right? In some states, the medical markets, you need to be vertically integrated, right? Yeah, you need to grow, you need to process, and you need to sell. In other states, that wasn't necessarily adopted. And so, to your point, kind of standards versus regulations, right? In some of the other states, you didn't have to do that, so that standard was different. And then, so even though you have these like high level standards for certain things that may be across the board the same, nevertheless, operationally, when you put that in place, because your structure is different, it ends up operationally being different. So, you know, in a sense, I think it becomes an interpretation issue because of how that particular market is set up.
Totally agree.
If I may jump in there as well, I couldn't agree more. Right, there are so many different markets and different values in each of these societies that the regulators represent. That in some cases they'll approach some things more strongly. Typically they're the same reasons that the regulators approach things. Right, you have health and safety, you have diversion into the black market, of course taxation, but also industry, job creation. And so different regulators have looked at it in different ways and said, a key component of why we're legalizing is to build industry. Therefore, we don't have a lot of capital in the country. Maybe we don't want to push like a hard GMP standard just to get things out the door and running. And so it may be a taxation approach. You were mentioning, marketing. Other societies feel that this is inappropriate, right? And
there is in the medical frameworks. There's health claim issues that are very differently interpreted in different jurisdictions because obviously it's local case law that defines at the end of the day what is considered a health claim and whatnot. So those distinctions are very different. But we're talking about harmonization here. So what are the things that we can harmonize? Let's try to focus on that. We can't harmonize a global medical legal framework in each jurisdictions. They're all going to probably be and remain different for a very long time. It may converge over the next 20 years, okay, but still, we're not going to change the US system to be the same as the German system. But there are certain frameworks that are harmonized or should be further harmonized. Atiya, which regulations would you like to point out here?
I think the standards is just a simple one, and the easiest one for sure is just GACP at a baseline. I mean, we do GACP certifications. So GACP is a completely uncontrolled standard, which means that nobody owns the World Health Organization and the EMA GACP. So as
Can I just ask you, because some of the people may not know the abbreviation,
no problem,
so what does GACP mean?
Yep, so GACP is Good Agricultural and Collection Practices, World Health Organization is WHO, and the EMA is the European Medicines. So those standards, 2003, the World Health Organization published their guidelines, and these were heavily designed in response to the increase in Chinese traditional herbal medicine. At that time, you might have recalled, there was a lot of Chinese medicine on the markets. It was coming up very big. And they were having problems where the wrong herbs were being collected or the wrong amounts were being sold to people, and there wasn't any oversight. And so they had these coming in as medical products, as like naturopathic stuff was very big at the time, and nobody had oversight. So WHO made theirs in 2003, and then 2006, the European Medicines made theirs. They are uncontrolled standards. Neither the World Health Organization or the European Medicines Agencies are certifying bodies, which means that they themselves will never certify you against these standards. And until the advent of cannabis, most producers were just certifying themselves. There's a 26-page attestation you can fill out on the European Medicines website and certify yourself. The risk level with cannabis is so aggressive. It's not coming from a single country. It's not coming from a single source. The cultivation styles are different. The genetics are thousands, right? So then the advent of having to need a proper third-party GACP certification cropped up. So there are several, of course, companies that sell certifications, and many of them, especially if they're larger certifying bodies, to own the standard had to create their own. So there are many of them, and we try to have these talks with clients. You're comparing completely different things. In all of ours, we just do a straight certification to all of the WHO and EMA. We don't do anything extra, anything less. We do every single requirement, that's all. Whereas other firms may take some from World Health Organization, some from EMA, some from Global Gap, some from any host of whatever they want, because they have to create something proprietary that they own. And so, unfortunately, we have at the beginning stages of GACP certification was a nightmare. We knew people had certifications from 4 or 5 firms because they would go to a European buyer and the buyer would say, oh, I only want from this one, I only want from that one. So there were groups that were managing multiple certifications. And then you mentioned it in the intro, I am still supplier qualified auditing people who have certifications. So you have a certification from a third party. and then the buyer doesn't trust that, or because a part of their supplier qualification is they need to have a third-party auditor come in. And so these groups are getting a little bit stressed about being audited so many times over and over again. And so for me, that's probably one of the easiest things that we can work on harmonization towards, and having a little bit like less of the burden being on producers, who I think many of which find all of the quality stuff a little bit.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. So GACP and obviously also GMP. What other standards should be harmonized? Do we have any other standards? I think we're already far ahead if we manage those two. Switzerland actually solved that issue with the certification by introducing something called accreditation. And an accredited GACP producer is one where the state actually gets a certification that is, let's say, underwritten by the state. And that's how it works now in Switzerland. That actually really helps to make sure that you have a certain quality control. It's stronger than just a private entity that basically certifies a company. So you have the Swiss kosher stamp from the government.
If I may jump in, Daniel, to this one, I think a good way forward towards harmonization, and I totally agree with Atiya that harmonizing the starting material, which is highly diversified out there, should be the starting point for that. Is what you're mentioning, accreditation, and for private certification bodies having their guidelines accredited by national authorities, and those accreditation guidelines to be unified in a European or global level. I think this should be the way forward.
I think there's a very stark contrast, though, between which country has issued the GACP, because everyone in Thailand has a Thai GACP, and nobody in Europe trusts it. There is not a single person who is like, yeah, we're just going to take this at face value and accept it. And obviously Switzerland, with their country reputation, unfortunately, has a really large impact on how people feel about the certifications that you've been given in your licenses as well, like the stringency of what your country is known for from a quality perspective and an oversight perspective.
You know, I think that can't be underscored enough, because until, right, like in institutions, best practices guidelines are, like, they're great, right, but they're only so good until like a governing authority adopts them, right? I mean, they'll be enforceable as between ourselves, but until an agency actually is capable of enforcing those, right? And then enforces that with, you know, whatever repercussions, right, may flow from that, sanctions or what have you, until a governing body actually does that, you know, there's not going to be much, you know, they're not really going to take hold. You know.
I would like to dig a bit deeper into quality. So from a GMP and quality systems perspective, what is the single biggest barrier to regulatory harmonization across cannabis markets today? Nikos?
I would say what we've mostly already discussed, and what Atiya said, like the starting material. I would say that since a lot of people claim to have GACP or are self-certified, or they have a Thai GACP or from any organization in the world, this is a very diverse product, and we're trying here to control the end product of a system, like the GMP end product, by not adequately controlling the inputs of the system. So we have to dig deeper in there and have the starting material adequately controlled through supply audits and stricter supply audits.
Atiya, GACP Annex 1 was just changed recently. There was an amendment. Can you give us some more flavor on?
Yeah, that's been a really big pain for producers. So the Annex 1 adjustment came out in 2025. So as I mentioned, the original EMA GACP came out in 2006. So this is almost 20 years later. They finally make an update, and they've pulled a bunch of GMP requirements into GACP, which is an absolute nightmare for cultivators. Some of them don't even know what the word validation means if all of a sudden they're told they have to have a validation policy and a full cultivation validation. And so what I was going to mention on the GMP side, and this is a personal story of a client of mine, but we shipped about $750,000 of cannabis from Australia into Germany, and it all got rejected and is being shipped back. And the reason is Germany has an MRA with the TGA, which is the Therapeutic Goods Administration GMP. On paper, they are supposed to accept the GMP. Australia and Germany, because if you look at the table of where you have the delineation of what is GACP and GMP, drying is the weird one. It says, some people say GACP, some say GMP. It's highlighted in the table under both. I remember when Germany, Bee Farm finally made the public announcement that drying was going to be GMP. It was a gray until that point, and I was in the middle of designing a facility and had to change it. And so Australia had actually gone backwards. They first said drying was GMP, and then when they finalized, they moved it out. So in Australia, you can dry and trim under GACP, and then the final like hand trim touch-up and pack is GMP. But in Germany, it's very clear that drying onwards. So they would not accept the product from Australia because the Australian facility did not have drying GMP. Frankly, it's none of their business because you have an MRA and you said that their GMP was equivalent. So we're seeing a lot of this pushback from Germany. And in my opinion, overstepping, if you have a mutual recognition agreement, it shouldn't be allowed for you to do that. But of course, it's a buyer's market. And so they're allowed to do whatever they want.
And Attia, what does drying mean? When does it start? I mean, sometimes there are certain jurisdictions that do some pre-drying, let's say, under GACP, and then they say, well, the final drying we'll do in Germany then, under GMP. What's your experience there?
Yeah, so we do this a lot. I mean, we do GMP compliance, and we do the entire prep for you to get your certification, and we find you the certification sponsor. And again, Germany is very different state by state. We pick sponsors in states that we know are a little bit more understanding of the process. Realistically speaking, you can't take fresh flower from all the facilities that cultivate for you, drive it or fly it to your GMP facility and dry it down. It's not possible. So essentially, if it's somebody who is doing in their own building, they're cultivating and drying, we do the entire dry in GMP. If they're GMP converting the product, we typically allow there to be a product specification up to maybe 16% moisture that the product is received into and dried down to the final 12%.
That's our experience in Switzerland as well. Rob, you've been silent for a while. Sorry.
Well,
I want to hear what tech plays. What does? Tell me a bit. Tell
Sure.
us a bit about your company.
Yeah.
It's interesting, and also how tech plays a role, obviously, in all of this.
No, thanks very much. It's as I was saying at the beginning, it's something we come across quite widely because we're 25 jurisdictions, all of them requiring different regulatory reporting. The one nice thing, in terms of harmonization is we've been talking about maybe getting some national or supranational bodies to come in and kind of align the certification. But as everyone's pointed out, that within the private sector, there is already some pressure for alignment along supply chains. And
May I just jump in here? So you think it should be an initiative that's led by government bodies or more by private entities and industry associations to create some standardization processes that are accepted or sort of incorporated by reference into supply agreements and so on? How do you think this should?
It's a good question, right? How to best approach it. I mean, obviously there has to be some input from industry because they have the expertise. They understand what the cost and burden is on them for reporting. And in terms of industry associations, that's a great voice for the industry to align all their interests and what have you. And typically private industry can move a little bit faster than government. And just as an amusing anecdote, we're talking about 24 jurisdictions and different bureaucracies and getting things changed. Even within Canada itself, it's one country. And Attia, I'm sure you've lived this. There's the Health Canada Health Report, but there's also the Tax Authority Report, the B300. And there's one line item there. They're measuring the exact same thing, and one of it wants it in product weight, and the other wants it in THC milligrams. So even these offices are across the street from each other in Ottawa, but they still can't figure out how to harmonize the reporting. Yeah. Right.
I'm a bit mindful of time, so I really want to hear more about the tech part. So tell us about Core IQ and how you tackle tech, because I really think that tech has a huge role to play in all of that, because if it's adopted if the same platforms are adopted across jurisdictions, is a very, very easy way to ensure that there is a certain way of harmonization because the platforms are set up to make sure that it's the same processes.
100%. And so in these different jurisdictions, regardless of the type of GACP background that people have, we can we can record all of it and output it in whichever way we want. So the question we often get is, you're in these different jurisdictions, you're with groups that are doing, GACP or GMP or GPP, right? All this different stuff. But actually the process of cultivating, processing, drying, whatever is, there are some nuances, but it's generally the same, right? And the software platform is set up so that you can use it for a Thai GACP cultivation, you can use it for Canadian, you can use it for EU GMP. So the fields are there, and we pick most of them up. Right? The question is whether there's somebody there to interpret the output and ensure that the correct things are being looked at and audited and moved forward. So if you're using a system like this, it's typically recording most of the information that you would need for most of the standards. You just need to get some expertise in-house, and I'm looking on either side of me to come in and help you really understand and align that.
Because my feeling really is that you're actually providing the solution, which Atia mentioned before, is one of the big problems, right? GACP from Thailand, not accepted in Switzerland. However, if you used your platform or another competitor's platform, whatever platform that is high industry standard, is to some extent sort of a Swiss badge.
Yeah.
But again,
to make sure that it's high quality.
But I think tech, right, only gets you so far, and we've already, your other question about private sector driving harmonization versus government involvement, right? So I'll say one, in the U.S., you're always required to have an inventory tracking system, right? Seed to sale, all the things, and at the end of the day, all of those different programs really track the same things, right? The data that goes in is pretty much similar, but the reporting, right, that then gets put out it changes from state to state, right? In the U.S. and anyway, and so and the regulators, right? I mean, in the States anyway, the government is the last to adopt technology, right? Tech platforms. I mean, in New York itself, it took, I think, we're 3 years into the market, and we still just got the seed to sale program running with the state, to really interact. So you're talking about, tech is assisting, but until the regulators are adopting those platforms and are comfortable with it and have the capabilities to be able to work with it, that's one of the biggest.
I can give you an example. In Switzerland, for example, the pilot projects have been assigned exclusively to one tech platform.
Yeah.
Which is doing everything for the pilot project.
Yeah.
And it has to go through that platform.
Yeah, I mean, in New York, you could use, the operators can use whatever seed to sale program they want, but it's got to be able to talk with the one that the state uses, right? And that company, that's the one that got the state contract. And so of course that one is the one that's going to capture ultimately, be the one that most of the operators use, just because it's the easiest, right? And so.
Yeah, the U.S. is a special place with regards to cannabis regulation. It's there are a few interesting nuances there. I mean, one of them that causes a lot of pain for cultivators there is individual plant tracking.
Yeah.
And as a software, when we went into the U.S., we had to start to figure out, okay, how are we going from batches to individual plants? And that was probably the biggest jump that we had to make, is because we were going into really a different system. Like globally, most groups are at least somewhat aligned with a type of GACP or GMP standard. But, in the US, some states are with GMP as well, but the single plant tracking and recording by the government was, a whole new data point and fundamental adjustment for the software. So.
I mean, we just, in New York, we just faced litigation in the industry about it. Do you have to tag at the individual product, or can you do it at the batch level? And so ultimately the resolution of that most likely is that the government is picking up the tab for these individual product tags. We'll see.
Okay. Atia, you had one more. I see that you're ready.
Yeah, I mean, I think like when we talk about, obviously software is the support, right? But the software supports the system. So the system has to exist. And when we talk about whether or not the governments are going to, the governments are not going to do this, like just realistically speaking.
Yeah.
And I came from the dairy industry, which is extremely highly regulated. That was the last thing I worked in before cannabis. And what I started my quality association for was to not reinvent the wheel, but to basically steal from the food industry. So the BRC, which is a British retailer consortium, essentially, was a very large group of British retailers that came together and said, we cannot go to all these countries and learn their domestic regulations. It's way too much work to figure out who we can buy things from our supply chain from. So they created a whole set of schemes. You've got FSSC 22000, you've got SQF, you've got all these. And the schemes are, depending on what part of the supply chain. Are you on the grocery side? Are you on the raw material side, et cetera? And so the industry came together. They developed a set of schemes that affect you depending on the portion of the supply chain you're in. And they have regular audits and certification that happens by certification bodies that own the standards. It's a lot of work. I can't imagine any government stepping up and saying, we are going to quality audit cannabis facilities. There's hundreds of them in Canada, like hundreds of them. They'd have to open an entirely new department. And it's not their strong suit. They're not a certifying body. It makes sense for us to work together, create standardized schemes that are, okay, if you're just cultivating, it's this. If you're just extracting, it's this. If you're cultivating and extracting, it's this. If you're retailing, it's this. All the way from basically tip to tail, creating schemes that we then have certifying bodies that own and enforce. And that's where we have to get to, I think. It's just, it's going to take a long time for sure. And I think the biggest challenge is that these are very forward-looking things, and everyone in cannabis is looking about 2 inches in front of
That's
their
right.
face.
But thank God we have AI now that's going to help us accelerate everything. It's going to think much faster than all of us combined. Nikos, you've been tracking a little bit what's going on in AI and GMP standards. There's an annex in draft.
Yeah, that's correct. Annex 22.
But that's the last. Okay, so you got 30 seconds, and then we're going to open for questions.
Sure. There's an Annex 22 of the GMP guidelines now in draft, which talks about AI implementation in the manufacturing, other than the typical Claude, ChatGPT, LLMs for SOP drafting or all that stuff. It's a framework on how to use AI in the critical process manufacturing, like the extraction or like controlling the drying environment and all that stuff. But at the very end point, it has to be a human that's controlling that and validating the results, making sure that the AI is there to help you, but not making decisions for you. But yeah, as you said, this is something that's coming up, so maybe it's a good thing for a panel discussion for ICBC 2027.
It's definitely something we all have to reckon with and really start thinking how can AI help accelerate the process of harmonization. We're opening up to questions now.
Let's hear it for the panel. Who has questions? We have answers.
Lisa has a question, right?
Lisa Hogg always has a question. Her question is, why are you asking me?
Sorry, Lisa, to put you on the spot.
Yes, of course you can have a question. Everyone can have a question as a treat.
Well, we all know how fast-paced this industry is, and how do you think should be the optimum regulatory scenario so we can finally work like any regular industry that is just like a normal industry and not bothered by all these like restrictions? What needs to happen to go to that place?
Anyone want to take this pretty broad question?
It's a hard question.
I'd say just at a minimum, like service standards. It's something that like certain countries have them, and they're like, look, we're going to respond to you in like 3 to 5 weeks. And then other countries, I have clients that have been trying to get licensed for 3 years because it's as long as the regulator wants it to be. So that's like a real big impediment to building up industries if you don't know how long a process for licensing will take. Getting investment, planning what's going on, all of that's very simple. So any of the overarching authorities managing licensing, I think at a minimum, should give us a bit of a timeline of how things are going to move forward.
Are there more questions? All right. I guess everyone is sufficiently educated. We need a global weed czar. All right.
Yeah, a dictatorship would do it too, to be honest, yeah. I'm sure in China everything's perfectly harmonized in terms of cannabis regulations. So maybe that's the way to go.
This is not allowed. No. Yeah. Well, all right. Well,
thank you very much, everyone.
Let's hear it for everyone. There you go. We'll save a little time. We'll do some things. Thank you again, man. Appreciate you. You stay in great shape.